Okay, so in our previous class, we started developing our projects, and our project, we implemented the route, and we also started implementing the controllers. Okay, so before we continue with the controllers, we also need a way to make our database work. So what we basically do is to move to change directory to our database folder so we can apply migrations. Okay, so before I continue, Anthony, you have room to ask questions. But some of your questions, if you ask and I answer you, you won't still understand because there are things that are built on top of others. So if something is built on top of another one and you don't understand the base, you don't understand what that is standing on, you won't understand the one that is on top. So basically, you need to understand the basics, what something is built on before you understand that very thing that is built on top of the base. So you have every room to ask questions. Okay, so I mentioned migrations. So migrations, let's take it as a way to evolve our database. Now, it's a way to track your progress. Let's assume it's a way to track the involvement of your database. Like when you create, let's assume when you start developing your app, first of all, you create a user schema. So you apply it, you create that table in your database, and then you start testing, you start adding users to your database. And then later on, you want to add another schema, like let's say blog users, blog posts or user profile, or you want to evolve your database. And let's assume your application is already in production. So what you will basically do is you will add that schema and then you apply migrations. So even if it's in production, those the schema will be added to your database and then you will not lose data. So migrations help you keep record of your database. You can apply down migrations or up migrations that you can undo changes or apply changes. Let's assume you added user profile that you actually want to undo it. You don't want to add it anymore. What you basically do is you can just migrate down, undo the change, and then fall back to your previous schema. So that is basically what migrations are. So right now, we will learn how to apply migrations.
Recording in progress.
We'll learn how to apply migrations. So let's navigate to our database folder. Nope. Not Postman, our database folder, this VS Code. Let me zoom in a bit. Okay, I think this is great. Let's navigate to database and then index tiers. Okay, so what I would love to do is just add another function here. And before I proceed, if you have any questions, you can just raise your hand or type it in the chat and I'll respond to your question. Okay, so now let's see how we can apply migrations. So first of all, we have to create a user schema, and also we'll call it a user table, so that these tables can be created in our database, then we can be able to like add data. So if we'll come up here, I will just do everything in our database directory. So we'll come up here, and in here I will say const schema is equal to, let's say it's equal to a template string like this. So now we will evolve our database, but we'll do it once because we don't have time to like keep applying migrations. So first of all, we create a table for users, a table in our database that we can add user. Remember, this is structured query language, SQL. We're using SQL, that is structured query language with SQLite. So we have to create tables. You know, structured query language handle stored data in tables, columns, and rows, all of that. So we have to first of all create a table, a user table. So what we do here is we are now writing SQL. And Anthony, I believe you have a whole lot of questions to ask, but I want to introduce all of this. It's left for you to make research. Just learn. Just keep your brain open. You have to learn. You have to learn the hard way. If that's the only way you can do it, just learn. So what we want to do now is we want to create a user schema. So we say create table if not exist, and this is English. So I believe you exist. I believe you understand what's going on here. And first of all, we create the users table before we come back and create the nodes and the migrations table. And then I will show you why we need the migrations table in a bit. So we say users, and then we open our brackets here. And inside of here, we say we need, what properties do we need the user to have? The user will have an ID, a username, a password, and a created at property. So first of all, the ID will be of an integer. So we say ID will be of data type integer, and it will be the primary key which we will use to get the user from the database, and it will be auto incremented. Okay, so after this, I'll pause and then explain what this means. Okay, so what we are saying here is auto increment. Let me not make auto increment like this. So this is the first property user we have, the ID. It will be of an integer, and it also be the primary key in this table, which we'll use to identify, we'll use it to get the user from the database, and then also use it to update or delete a user. So what we are basically saying here is this ID should be of a type integer, 1, 2, 3, 4, and upwards. So the auto increment here means if we create a first user, the ID should be 1. And then if you create another user, the user should take the ID of 2. So the database will auto increment the ID depending on how many records are in the database. So if we have 2 records, they have ID 1 and ID 2. The third record, we have an ID of 3. The database will auto increment the integer. So this is what it means. We have our ID property. It should be an integer, and it will act as our primary key, which we use to identify the user in our database, and it should always increment if there are new records, if we add new records. Okay, so the next property here should be username. So our username here, it should be a character of variable length. That is varchar 30. It should be a character of variable, let's say varying length. Let's make it like that. A character of varying length. That is, it should be a character of not just single character, but a character of varying length. And the maximum characters it can hold should be of 30. It should be of length 30. So your username can start from a single character to 5 characters, 20 characters, but should not exceed 30 characters. So this is basically what this means. Varchar username should be a variable, a varying character of length 30, but it shouldn't exceed 30, and it should not be null. While creating a user, you must provide it. It should be null. It should not be null. that it shouldn't be optional. You must provide it while creating a user. And then the next property is the password. And the password here, it should be a varying character of length 20, the maximum length of 20, and it shouldn't also be null. Okay, the next property should be created at. That is the time the user was created. That is the time we added the user to our database, and this should be a timestamp. We already know what the timestamp is. The current time we added, so the time now is 12:19. Now, if we add a user to our database now, the time will be 12:19. This date 12:19. That is when we added our user, the first user to our database. And it should default. The default value should default to the current timestamp. Current timestamp. So the current timestamp now, it should be this date. That is 28th of June, 2024, Friday, 12:20. That is the current timestamp. Okay, so we want to make our username unique. You know, our ID is automatically, the primary key of every table is always unique. So our ID here is unique, but we want to make our username also unique so that we can find a user by their username. So if we want to make our username unique, we say unique. Let me say username like this. So now we've made our username unique as well. So we cannot have more than one username, like more than one unique username in our database. So if a person has a username of KodeCamp, another person cannot have that very username. So now we have, this is the basic properties a user in our database we have. So let's create another table of notes. So now that we've understood this, and basically, I'm not teaching you SQL, but I just want to introduce this to you so that at least you have the basic knowledge of SQL, so that when you start learning, at least you already know the basics, how it works under the hood, and how these things and all of that. So you can go ahead and then make your own research and then learn it. I think introducing this, all of this to you, and making you know that it's all important. It's a kind of a very good way to start. So we also want to create a table of nodes. So the reason why we're saying create table if not exist is because every time we apply our migrations, we want to check the database. If the table doesn't exist, then we create the table in the database. So that's why we're saying create table if not exist users, and then create table if not exists nodes. And then we open our brackets here. And then what properties do we expect our notes to have? Our notes, we have an ID. First is ID, the title, the content of the notes, the user ID, because we want to identify, every user will have their own note. So if you create a note, in order to be able to identify a note created by a specific user, we'll attach the user ID to the note, so that when we want to get the note of a specific user, we reference the user ID in the notes, and then we grab the note of that user from that table. Also, another property is created at, that is the time the note was added in the database. So let's come back and then start with the ID. The ID will be of an integer, and it will serve as a primary key. And it will also auto increment anytime we add a note. So if we have 10 notes, the first note we have an ID of 1, second note ID of 2, third note ID of 3, so till we get to 10, and then the 10th one we have an ID of 10. So the title here will have a variable, a character of varying length. So the character here will be of varying length, and then we say the title can be of 100 characters and must not be null. It must not be optional. While creating a note, you must add the title. And then the content here will be of text. Text must not be null. Text here we just say should be of text, can be of 1,000 length, 2,000, the length of the character can be of length 1,000, then 2,000 or 3,000 characters or so. And it must not be null. You must provide a character. So the user ID here is actually an integer because we are referencing this user ID. And this user is an integer. So this also must be an integer and it must not be null. So moving on, we have created that, and this is the timestamp, and we default is to the current timestamp. So let us copy that and then bring it over here. Let's default this to the current timestamp. So moving on, we have this user ID, but then every time we want to create a note, basically what we want to do is we want to reference the user ID from the users table. So what we want to do here, this is now a foreign key. This becomes the foreign key. Why is it a foreign key? It's a foreign key because we are using this key to reference a record in another table. So we are using this key here to reference a user in the users table. So when we want to get this note, this key here now points to the user, to that user in the users table. So it becomes a foreign key because this is a key, but this is not the primary key because it's not referencing a record in this table. It's referencing a record in another table. So it becomes the foreign key. Okay, so if you have any questions, you are free to type it in the chat or basically raise your hand so I can go ahead and answer you. So moving on, now since it's a foreign key, we're referencing the user ID. The foreign key should be of the user ID, this user ID here. So where is the reference? How is it referencing and what reference is it taking on in the other table? Is it the username or is it the user's table, or is it another table that we want to reference from? So we want to reference the user's table, and then we want to grab the user ID from the user's table, and then we want to make it serve as the foreign key in the notes table. So what we do is we say references. So it references users, and then the ID of the user from the user's table. And then we'll say on delete cascade. On delete cascade. Okay, so what this means is we're saying anytime we delete a user in our database, all the user's notes, all the notes that the user has created should also be deleted. If we delete a user of name KodeCamp, all the KodeCamp notes in our database should be deleted because there's no way we can get those notes without the user's ID, and we've deleted the user. So all the user's notes should also be deleted. Okay, so now how do we apply our migrations? So we will apply our migrations by writing a function, apply migration. So we come down here, we say export async function, apply migrations. And then in this function, we will not pass in any parameters. What we basically do in this function, we say try, we bring in a try catch block, and inside of this try, we say const db is equal to await init db, like this. So we want to grab the database and then apply our migrations. So we want to say await db execute schema. So once we execute this schema, all these tables will be created in our database. And then we can be able to add users, and then we can also be able to add notes. So right now we've applied our migrations, then we can see log migrations. We can see migrations. Okay, let's say migrations applied, like this. We can say migrations applied, and then we will return. Basically want to return. say return like this without doing any other thing. Okay, so basically we've applied our migrations. So if there's any error, we log the error to the console. You see error applying migrations. See error like this. You can add a colon like this. And then we exit the process with an error code process exit 1 like this. But now how we want to use this function is we want to call this function in our index TS file, but we don't want to apply these migrations every time we start our applications. We just want to apply it the very first time these migrations are not applied. So if there are no new schemas in our database, we simply not apply the migrations. So how do we take care of this? Now, what I'm trying to say is, let me explain it in another language. What I'm trying to say is this. We don't want to create new tables every time we start our application. If those tables exist in our database, we will simply not create them. We will just start our application and then continue. So how do we make this possible? So we'll come up here and then we'll add another table. And this table is simply used to track our migration. Say create. This is my normal speed. I just want you to understand this one. Create table, if not exist, migrations, like this, migrations. And then in this one will be very, very simple. What we do here is say ID integer, and then we say primary key. Let me say applied will be of type Boolean. And it must not be null. And it will default to 0. Okay, so you may be asking, if applied is a Boolean and default, why is it defaulting to 0? Okay, now I just guess I hope we'll finish this up today, because I will just have to explain everything. Because do you know that 0 is false and 1 is true? 0 simply means false and 1 means true. So the values true and false are simply 0 and 1. In binary, you already know that 0 and we have deal with zeros and ones. So 0 simply means off, 1 means on, 0 is false, 1 means true. So we're saying applied here is a Boolean and the default value should be false. We are saying the default value should be false. That is why in SQL, the default value 0 means false. Okay, so moving on, we've created a table for our migrations. So we will use this schema now to keep track of our migrations and make sure we don't apply these migrations every time we start our database. So how do we do that in our apply migrations function? So before this DB exec schema, we come here and we say migrations applied is equal to await DB get. We want to get the applied migrations where the ID is 1. So what we do here is we want to say select means select applied, select this record, select this table from select this property, this applied property, which is a Boolean. Select it from the table migrations. So select it from this table, which is migrations, where the ID is 1, because we will only create it once and it will have only one record. So we say ID equal to 1. We're not creating it twice. And then we will do a check. We come over here. Okay, let me say this. By now, Anthony is already confused, but don't worry. This is just temporary. You get to understand things. So we come here and we say, if migrations applied, if we have that record in our database, it means we've applied our migrations. Because when we execute this schema, this table will also be created. So if we have this table in our database, it means we have applied our migrations. So if migrations applied and we have this in our database, and then we have these migrations applied. Remember, we have this applied this thing in our database. We also have migrations applied. We'll simply say, we'll simply log, what we log here, we'll say migrations have already been applied, like this. And then we will return early. We will not proceed. This return statement simply, it will return, but return with no value. We will return early, it will return void. We will return early without no value. We will not get up to this exec method. We will return early if we already applied our migrations. But if not, this is the place where we apply our migrations if not already applied. So now we have our function that checks for migrations. So this is basically the time to go to our index tiers and then add this function to our app. So we'll now go to our index tiers. Where is our index tiers file? Here. And then we see await apply migrations like this. And then we'll call our function because this is and this is an asynchronous function. So you need to await the migrations to be applied. So if everything we've written here is correct, if everything here is correct, and then here is also correct, what we do is we say npm run dev, and then let's see what we've got. Okay, error applying migrations. If there are no such table migrations, okay. So now we get this error, and then what I will do is I will stop this app, come over here. What we will do now is we will remove this because the migrations have not been applied yet, and then we are checking for migration. So we'll simply remove this check here, apply our migrations first, so we can continue our check. So now what we want to do is we want to apply let's apply these migrations first. npm run dev. Okay, apply SQL, no such table as migration. Comment this one out as well. And then let our app start and let's see what it does. SQL error near applied. Okay. It's like this, a syntax error here. Applied boolean not null. And then default. Okay, there's supposed to be a comma here. Then let's save our database and then try once more. Near default syntax. Default, okay. Why are we getting the errors? Default syntax error, near default. Okay, it is default, not default. Default to 0. Okay, let's do it once more. Near this. Okay. So as you can see, we are getting errors. Create. Near create syntax error. create table, create table. Okay, so what basically may be causing this? Okay, let's examine our schema once more. Create table if not exists, migrations ID, and then all of this. ID, integer primary key, then applied Boolean, not null, default 0. Okay, so now I've seen that we're supposed to add a semicolon after every table. So we're supposed to add a semicolon here and here. Okay, so now let's start this and see. Created add syntax, created, okay, there's supposed to be a comma here as well, and then here as well. So let's see what we've got now. Migrations applied. So now if you come to our database and then open the SQL, now you see the file is not displayed in the text editor because it is either binary or uses an unsupported text encoding. Now we've applied migrations and then our database is now functioning because it has an extension of DB. So it's either binary or we can't view the contents of the database. Okay, so now we'll come over here and then uncomment this. So now that I've uncommented this, okay, error applying migration, no such table or migrations. Okay. No such tables or migrations. So why is it saying, okay, we've not applied this one. So what we basically do is we come over here, comment this out. And let's see again, if we get the same error. No such table migration. It is migrations, not migration. Migrations. Okay, so no linter, we're just facing these issues. Okay, and now we have migrations already applied. Migrations already applied. Okay, so let's test this out and then see content to text node null, and then save it and see what you got. Migrations already applied. Okay. So this is just basically, this is our basic implementation. The reason why I did this is because I never extended the feature. I just wanted us not to create, because this is all we need in our database. This is all the tables we need in our database. So I needed to keep record of this table, not to subsequently apply our migrations. So now every time we save our file, now our app will restart, and then we have migrations applied. Okay, migrations applied. We commented something out here. Okay, migrations have already been applied, and then we have migrations applied. Okay, let's save this once more and then see. Migrations applied. So every time we save our database, the migrations are being applied. Okay. So, but we're supposed to be getting migrations already applied, and what is the case here? Okay, so I forgot one thing. So after executing the schema, what we do here is we say await db run, and inside of this run function, we say insert or replace. This is to update into migrations. insert or replace into migrations. And then we say, what do we want to insert or replace into migration? We say ID applied, and then we say the values. We change the value of the applied to true, because the value is still false. That is why we are not getting migrations have already been applied. So we say the value of the ID to 1, and the value of the applied to also 1. This is true. Now, if this runs now, we have migrations applied. So save the database once more. And then we have migrations have already been applied, and that is sweet. Okay. So now it is working as expected. So let's explain the whole scenario, what's actually going on. Okay, so what's going on here is simply this. Now, we have this table to track our migrations. So first of all, the value here, we have the applied is 0. That is, we have not applied our migrations. So here, what we want to do here is this exec schema simply applies our migrations and it creates this table in our database. So after creating this table, then we will run this SQL command. So we edit, this is update. We'll update this migrations table, and then the applied property, what we want to do in the applied, let me say, is it a row, the applied row, or is it a column? Oh, I'm forgetting if it's a column or row. Then we want to change the applied to true, and then the ID here to 1. So that by the time we get this migrations table, and then we grab the applied, we say that, okay, we've already applied our migrations. So let's return a, let's not apply our migrations again. So this is basically what we are doing here. So our migrations are being applied, and then our database now is up and running. So, okay, now let's proceed. And this is, if you really don't understand it, it's all depend on the SQL syntax, and then you can go back and learn it. So moving on, we have our controllers here. We have the auth controllers. But before we implement our auth controllers, we have to come to the model here and then do something in the model. So our model has 3 files. We have the auth, the notes, and the index TS. And then I will show you in just why we have these 3 files here. Okay. What if a migration is already applied and you want to apply another migration? Don't you need to set the false after each successful migration? Okay, Timothy, I said this is a simple implementation. So in ORMs, like implement, I never wanted to make this complex, because there's a way we do that. After applying the migrations, we have to check before that. What we will do is we have to check if there's another new table, or the schema of the table has changed. If it has changed, we will reapply the migrations. But we don't want to do that. We have ORMs. This is just a basic implementation. I just wanted to show you what migrations are. So basically, what we want to do here is you can simply add a functionality that updates the database and then set the applied to false if there are changes to the schema or blah 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 and all of that.
Don't finish.
But that is not the case. Now this is just a simple implementation. So that is just a simple implementation. So now what I want to do is we want to go to our model, and in our model we will create these 3 files. Okay, so we create these 3 files. So we have auth TS. So we have auth TS, and then we have index TS. We have another one here. We have to create a model for the note TS. Okay, so now in our auth TS, we have to write functions that can first of all, we have the sign up, the sign in, the main route, and the sign out. But then there's not, we don't have anything to do with the sign out here. So first of all, what the models here, we have the create user. We have a function that will create a user in our database. And then we have a function that will get a user in our database. With these two functions, we can implement the sign up and the sign in. So we will also have another function that we get the user ID, but this one has nothing to do with the database. So basically what we do is we first of all start with the create user function, say export async function create user. So what will this function take? It will take an object as a parameter, and then the object will contain the username. Is it okay, username and password like this. So inside of this function, what we will basically do here, we'll say, and the username and the password, okay, we have username here will be of type string. Password will also be of type string like this, and this is not a comma, it's a semicolon. Will be of type string like this. So what do we need to do in this function? Okay, first of all, what we want to do in this function is we also import DB, the database, because this is they will call the database and then we'll create the user. So we say if the database is not initialized, if where is the DB? I wanted to get it. Okay, let's say import DB from, where is the DB? From database or DB already know about it, okay. Declares DB locally, but it's not exported. Okay, I thought we exported our DB here. Okay, so we have do not export it, export DB. And there is the reason why we're not getting access to it. Okay, so now we have our DB here. If DB we throw an error if it is not initialized. If the database initialized means if the database is not open in any, because we've handled that, but basically if it is not open, then we just have to handle all the edge cases. Throw new error, and in this error we say database not initialized like this. Okay, so database not initialized. But if the database is initialized, what we do is we'll say const created user is equal to DB is equal to await. This is an async. Okay, await, not async, await DB run. So our function is an async function. Okay, so we can use await. So run here, we want to add this user to our database. So in adding this user, we'll say insert into users. And then what do we want to insert in our users table? The username and password. So what are the values we want to create these users with? Then we'll say values. And inside of this bracket, we say question mark and another question mark like this. And then we provide the values. Here are the values. They will say username, password. Okay, so this is basically how to add a user to the database. So we want to insert into the users table a username and a password. So as we've already seen here, the integer and the created they have default values, so they will be created automatically. but we have username and password that we have to provide value. This is an auto-incremented value, so it will start with 1. So this will default to the current timestamp, which we will create a user now. The current timestamp will be this timestamp here. So in this model, we've created the user, and then we check if the user is created. So now that the user is created, what we want to do is, and since this is an asynchronous function, we can just grab this. After grab them, we can say try catch like this. Then we can drop this here. Then we can say log the error to the console if an error occurs. And then we say error, or we can say error creating user like this. Then we log the error to the console. Or we can, after that, we can even throw the error. Just simply throw the error like that. So now, after creating the user, we grab the user ID because we want to create we want to create and then return the user as well. So after creating the user, we grab the user ID, so say const user ID is equal to created user dot last. Is it created? Okay, created user dot last ID. Now we want to grab the user ID. So now that we've grabbed the user ID, what we want to do is we will return the user from the database, say db get, and then we'll specify here the values that we expect to be returned from the database. So what we want to return is simply the ID, and which is of type number, and objects, basically ID, which is of type number, and then username, which is of type string, like this. And in here, okay, what is this saying? Expect at least one argument but got 0. Okay, we've not provided an argument to the get function. That's the reason why we're getting that complaint. And in here, what we want to do is we want to select, we can just do something like this, and we select ID and username. If you want to select everything, you can say select asterisk like this. Then from the table you want to select, but in this case, select only the ID and the username from the users table. And where do we want to select these properties? We want to basically select these properties where ID is equal to question mark, and then we provide the user ID here. So after creating the user, we want to grab the user and then return the user with the ID and the user ID. So after creating the reason why we're returning the user is because we want to create a JWT. We want to create a JSON web token and then send to the client so that the clients can be able to use it to make a subsequent request. So the client can be able to use it to make subsequent requests, because if a request is sent to the server, an authenticated request is sent to the server without the token, it will return unauthorized because it has to grab the token and then decode the token, so to get the user details in order to grab things from the database and then make other things. So this is basically what we need to do here. And you may be asking if this is, if you hover over this, you have, this is a database statement, and then the get here is returning a promise of ID and username. So why is this? The reason why here is because this is an asynchronous function, and then by calling this function, you will have to say await create user, and then you pass all of this inside. So when you say you await the function is returning a promise. So when you await it, the promise will be resolved. So I don't want to go in depth into that. You have to figure that out by yourself. So now that we've created, we basically created a user, we've implemented the function to create a user in our database. we want to also we head over to the controllers in our auth, and then we'll head over to sign up. So in our sign up function, what should we do in our sign up function to create a user? So this is another logic to implement. So in our controllers now, we are in our sign up function. So this is where they will implement the logic to basically add the user to our database and then sign up a JWT. So the first thing here is we have, let's body equal to this. Now, this is an event. We listen to the data event. We say request on data, the data event. So while listening to the data event, we will grab the incoming data in chunks. So while we grab the incoming data in chunks, we add every chunk to the body. We convert it to a string and then add it to the body. So we say body plus equal to chunk dot to string, and then we add it to the body. So we'll convert this chunk to a string and then we add it to the body. So after the data, we're done receiving the data, there's no more data, this event will be triggered, request on end. Once there's no data, this event will be triggered. So if this event is now triggered, what should we do? This is where we handle the logic. So we now have our complete data. So let's use our data to do something meaningful. So once this event is triggered, okay, it's async, not async. Async. So now when this event is triggered, we'll bring in our try catch block. And in here, we pass, it's coming in form of JSON. So we pass this to an object. So we use the JSON pass function. We say const username password is equal to JSON pass the body, because the body is coming in form of JSON. So we have to convert it to JavaScript objects so we can make use of it. And then the next step is to check if the username, if there's no username or there's no password, what we simply do is we say return bad request error, and then we pass in the response with a message of username and password are required. Username and password are required. Okay, so if there is a username and a password, we'll also check if the username length is less than 3, we'll see, we'll throw another bad request error, and then we'll say, we'll basically say return bad request error, and we pass in the response, and then we say username must be at least 3 characters, like this. And then we copy this one, and then we see if the password is less than 6 characters, we say password, let's see, password must be at least 6 characters, like this. Okay, so now that we have we've checked this, so we also check our database. And now this is time to use our, so we have to go back and then implement, add another function before we can proceed. So we get a user from the database and check if the user in our database, and then we throw and we let the person logging in, we let them know that, oh no, so this user is already in our database, so you cannot create a new user with those credentials. So how do we implement? Let's go back to our auth here, and then we have another function, and this function will simply be of get user. So say export async function get user, and this function will take a username. We'll get a user by their user name, which is a string. We get a user by their username. Okay, Toby, I will do that. Okay, let me just change it. If username, if password, thank you, Toby. I never noticed if password length is less than 6. Okay, so now in here we have this, and then we basically see we want to get. We also check. We'll see if the database is not initialized. Then we throw an error of database not initialized, and then after that we simply return db get, and then we say db get, then we say select. So what we want to get from you, we select, we get the user, we get everything, select everything from the user's table where username is equal to the username supplied. And then we say username like this. Okay, so now that we have our get user function, let's create the final function in our auth model. So the final function is export async. Okay, this is not an asynchronous function. So get user ID. And then we say we pass in the request. This should only take in the request. And then say the request is of incoming message like this. Export function get user ID. So the request is of incoming message like this. So what do you want to do? Say return request as any dot user dot ID like this. Okay, so now this function is confusing, but then we'll come back to it later when we must have implemented the middleware. So we forgot to add another folder here of middleware. Even though we're having one middleware, but this is a better structure, we have middleware. And then let's add a file of auth TS like this. So let's go back to our controllers. And in the auth here, we want to check if this a user has been created. So if a user has already been created, we want to let them know that there's a user with these details. So we can't proceed. Just use another username. It's already a user with these details. So what we do is we say existing, this is existing user is equal to await get user. This is coming from model. Okay, now let's come back to our model. And in our index.ts, we see export class user. And then in here, we see imports from user. So we have get user ID, and create user. So we come over here and say static get user is equal to get user like this. And then we see static get user. Oops, what am I doing? Get user ID is equal to get user ID. We'll add another one, static of create user is equal to create user like this. So now we are exporting this function. So what will come to our auth, and then instead of importing the get user directly, we say user, so that it can be implemented from the model. Then we say user dot get user, and then we pass in the user name like this. So we check if the user already exists. So say if user, okay, if existing user, what do we want to do? We want to return a bad request error, pass in the response, and then we say user already exists like this. Okay, so we've done all the necessary checks. So if there's no existing user, this is time to hash our password. So say const hash password is equal to, remember we have script and asynchronous script from the utils script. And then we call our script and we say, we have a hash method on that. We say hash, and then we pass in the password. See, password. So we want to hash the password. So once we pass in this hash, we hash our password and then return the hashed password. So then we see const user is equal to, then we'll have our username, and then we'll say password is the hashed password like this. And this is time to add the user to our data. Let me just stop the server. This is time to add the user to our database. And then we see const created user is equal to await user create user like this. And then this create user will take this user. Remember that this create user requires username and password, and it's an object. So instead of just passing in username and password, I decided to just simplify things and just pass in the user here directly. We treated this in JavaScript when treating objects, how we can pass objects as arguments to functions and all of that. So you don't have to get confused. This is just something you already know. So we're just taking advantage, we're just making use of it. So now that we've created a user, we check if the user is created. So if created user, we implemented a function after creating this user here, we are also returning the created user. So we're checking if the created user is returned. So if there's no created user, we want to return an internal server error. Because if there's no created user, that means there's an error on the server. So we pass in the response and then we say error creating user like this. Error creating user. But if the user is successfully created, this is where we construct a token and then send to the client. We say token is equal to import, let's import JWT. Import JWT from JSON Web Token. This is JWT, like this, JWT from JSON Web Token. So we say token is equal to JWT. And then what do you want to do? You want to sign a token and then send to the client. So JWT sign created user. And then we want to also pass in the secret. And remember in our env file, we already have a secret of some random test secret. So let's come over to our controllers and then pass in the secret of the same process env secret. And then, okay, here is created user. And this is complaining because it's saying overload the undefined is not, because it's thinking there may be an undefined. And then we talked about the non-nullable operator in TypeScript. So we say this is non-nullable. We say we are sure that we provided the secret, so don't complain. So now JWT is happy. So now that we've signed the token, when will the token expire? You don't leave it like that, because if you leave it, the token will never expire. So we say expires in, so this is a simple app, we say 7 days. So every week your app will automatically log you out. So you have to be logging for security reasons. But there are some apps with high security strategies. In that case, you can set this to 1 day, or if you are sending a magic sign, you can say 30 minutes. And after that 30 minutes, the magic sign link will be expired, and then the user will have to trigger another magic sign link. So in this case, we say 7 days. This token will expire after 7 days. And after the expiration date, you have to basically relog in, so that another token will be assigned to you. So after doing all of this, then we'll send success. Send success. Inside of this send success, it takes a response on an object. So this object basically takes to say status code. The status code, not that status code, please. Status code dot created. That is 201. That the user has been created. And then we see the data. Here we take the token. So if the why doing this? If there is any error, we see internal error rest, because it already has a default message of internal server error. So if there's any error, we get an internal server error. Okay, so this is sweet. Let's clear our terminal. It's time to test this out. It's npm run dev, and then this will check our database. Have we applied our migrations? So migrations are already been applied. Now let's open our Postman, and in this Postman, let's add a new request. And in new request, we have http auth /sign up. And then this is a post request. And then in the body here, it's a raw body of type JSON. Just select JSON. And then here I will add username of, let's see, install, and a password of, let's see, my tribal name says. Okay, so let's send this request and see what we got. This is a sign up. Send. Wow! And then we've got a request of success is true message, and then the default message is success. But we can pass in a message as well, and then we can see message. You can see message sign up success. You can do something like that. And then if you send this request once more, oops, it's like our app has not started. Okay, now it has started. So now let's go again and then send this request. Aha, but this time around, I'm going to change this already a user in our database. So you have user already exists and success is false. Now, if you reduce this password to 2, and then you send, okay, password. Okay, I think I'm supposed to get checking for the password length. I'm not spelling this correctly. Is it correct? Length, like this. This is length. I'm forgetting the spelling of length. Is it like this? Okay, so when you send this, okay, our server has not started. I guess it should start now. Send once more. Password must be at least 6 characters. And then if you bring back our password and then change this one to 2 characters, and then we send, we have username must be at least 3 characters. And then we completely remove it. Send. Internal server error, because this is an error. Okay, let's leave it like this. Send. Username and password are required, because this is empty. Username and password are required. So if you bring this back to Crystal, and then you do this, you remove this one empty, we have username and password are required. So if you bring it back, and then the other time we emptied it and we have, so everything, okay, everything is working as expected. So now let's head over to sign in. Now we've implemented our sign up functionality. So it's time to implement our sign in functionality. So let's be fast about it. Now that we have our sign up, it's time for sign in. So what do you expect? Sign in also we bring in username, password, and all of these gibberish we've got in here. So let's copy all of this up to this point. I think that's all. Up to this point. No, we should include this one as well. Let's copy this up to this point like this, and then paste it in here. So in here, we'll first of all, this is status code OK. So the default status code is OK. So we'll do away with that. And then we can basically change this to sign in success. And we'll be sending a token. So let's leave that. And then let's do away. Let's start from here. Okay. I guess we should start from here. Should the message be in data or after status code? It shouldn't be. The message shouldn't be in data. Is it in data? The other requests are okay. Okay, the server is not running. But I never took note of that. The message shouldn't be in. Okay, the message should be here. Thank you for that. The message should be here and not in the data. It should be here like this. Okay. Okay, that's great. That is where the message should be. Okay, so now that we have the sign in, and then we have, we'll remove the basic. So when we find this, we have the username, the password. I will check if there's no username. Okay, we remove something that we're not supposed to remove. We can add this back. If there's no username or password, so username and password are required. So we check for an existing user. So if there's no existing user, we say invalid credentials. This time around, we are not, because they've already created a user and they want to sign in, and there's no user, we say invalid credentials. So since there's invalid credentials, we can then say if the user exists, what we want to do is we want to not hash anymore. We'll say is valid, const is valid. This is equal to script compare. Then calling the method, you have the start password, and then you see existing user dot password get user. Okay, so what is the user returning? We're returning everything. So existing user password, and this is await script compare existing user password and then the incoming password, so that script will compare for us. Say now, if you say if the password is incorrect, it will return false. So if you say if it is not valid, what we want to do is we simply want to say return bad request, passing the response, and then we say invalid credentials. Invalid credentials like this, because the password they supplied is incorrect. And then we'll say this time around, we don't need a user, and we don't need to create a new user. You can see const payload is equal to, then we see the ID is the user ID, not the username, is the user, the existing user dot ID, and the username existing user dot user name, like this, and then we do away with this error creating user, and then we pass in the payload. So this time around, we want to sign the JWT with the username and the ID, and then send it to the client. Okay, so basically, this is our sign-in functionality. First of all, we check if there's a username and password, and if any one of them doesn't exist, a username and password required, then we check if the user exists. So if there's a user, we get the user from the database, and if there's no existing user, we say invalid credentials, but because they never signed up, they never created account in our on our app, and we don't have them in our database. But if there is, then we have to compare the password supplied and the one in our database. So if the password matches, we'll continue. But if it doesn't match, say invalid credentials. But if the password matches, then we'll sign a JWT with the ID and the username, and then we'll send it to the client. So let's test our sign-in functionality as well, and then see if it's working as expected. So let's create another request over here, and then this time around it should be sign in, and then we'll change this to post. And then we'll come over here, we'll copy our this thing, and then we'll come over to the body, the raw, and it's already JSON. So we paste it here, and then we send our request ASAP. Okay, now we have sign in success because our password matched. And then if we remove this page, and then we send this once more, we have invalid credentials. Okay, we add our age, we go, sign in success. We remove this O, we send, and we have invalid credentials. We add back our O, we send, and then we have sign-in success. So our sign-in functionality is also working as expected. So let's move over to main route. So the main route is a protected route. Most of us don't understand what this main route is all about. Well, okay, now we are in our main route. In our main route, we have to check this is where our auth middleware comes in. So we have to go back and then implement our auth middleware. So we go back to our middleware folder and then implement our auth middleware. So what are we doing with our auth middleware? So if they send back the token, we have to verify the token, and we have to make sure it is valid before we can actually allow them access to the resource they are requesting for. So we import JWT from JSON web token like this, and then we say the rest will be imported automatically. I don't want to waste time importing them. We say export function, then we name it check out like this. And then what we do is we pass in the request and response in the checkout. Request, we don't want to be the request, but let the request right here. Then we say this is incoming. It's an incoming message, and this one is a server response. Where is it? Server response. Why you? Oops. Okay. Server response. Okay. This server response. Why is it not popping up? Server. Okay. Let me just come over and say server response. Okay. So this one is giving me issues. Server response like this. Okay. So now that we've passed in these parameters in our checkout, what do we want to do with our check authentication? We have to check if the tokens are valid. So if they are valid, first of all, we want to get the request headers. Okay, so now let's say const request. Okay, let's say authentication headers. So let me just say auth header. is equal to request headers authorization. Okay, so now let's log the auth header and then return like this. So let's go back to our, I just want to show you something so we can, before we continue. So we see const auth is equal to check auth. Then passing the res like this. And then we return here as well, return. Okay, so now let's hop over to this place and then create a new request of, here should be main, auth main. And this is a get request and then send. Is our app running? Our app is not running. So let's start our server. So now our server have started. So let's check this once more. Send. Okay, let's cancel the request because we are returning, not returning. So, okay, the request headers, this is undefined. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll come over here, grab this token, come over to the nearest the request, go to authorization, come over to bearer token, and then come over here, clear this one, and then add this one, then make this request once more. Cancel it, come over to our terminal. And then we can see that the auth header, now it contains bearer and then our token. So how do we extract this token and then do away with this bearer keyword? So that's what we want to do. We want to get access to the token and then decode it. As you can see, this is the token we added there. So let's come over to our, no, not models, to our auth controller. In here, what we want to do is, now that we have our, not here, please, or it's in NodeJS, the auth tiers. So now that we have access to our auth header, we want to check if at all we have an auth header. So if there is no auth header at all, auth header, you see unauthorized error, and then we pass in the response. Then we return quickly, or we return false. Let's say, because we want to use it, let's return a Boolean. And then we still do another check. We say, if it doesn't even start with, or starts with, if it doesn't start with bearer, because as you can see, this starts with bearer. So if it doesn't start with bearer, that means it is incorrect. And then we'll say unauthorized, because the request you are sending does not contain a token. So unauthorized, and we also return false like this. And then we have another, and this time around, we have, it starts with bearer. So we want to extract the main token from the bearer. Say const token now is equal to, const token now is equal to auth header plus split. Plus split. We want to split it. You know, as you can see, there is a bearer. Where is it? There's a bearer, there is a space before the token. So we want to split it where there is a space. So we'll get the second part. Split it, it will return an bearer. Token will the token. We'll also say unauthorized the response. so I want to say if there's not okay, if there's a token, this is where we decode this token. So we can say we can basically say const decoded is equal to, you can say JWT. We want to verify the token. So we're going to verify. So for you to verify a token, we will use the secret we use to sign that token. And if it's a different secret, it will throw an error. The token will not be verified. And then we pass in the token we want to verify and the secret. We say process env secret. So it will still complain, and then we say we're sure of this. We've set the environmental variable, so don't complain. So after verifying this, we are sure that it contains the user information. Let's log decoded so you know what we are saying. Decoded like this. And then let's return LE. So let's send this request once more. Okay. Where is the button for the, okay. Now send it once more. Then cancel it. Let's come over here. Okay, so now we have ID is 1 and the username is Crystal. So we've decoded and then we've got the payload. So this is basically the user. So what we want to do is we want to add the user to the request object. Now that we've got the user's credential, we want to add the user to the request object. So how do we add the user to the request object? We say request as any. We want to change the request type because the user does not exist on the incoming message. So we want to change it to as an any. So this is what we call forgetting this name. So we want to change the request type. At this moment, we're changing the request type and then adding the decoded. So the decoded is basically user. So you can say dot user. We want to add the user to the request. So now the request has a property of user. So the user contains the user data, say decoded. You know, this decoded contains ID, name, IAT, and expo, all of that. Expiry, the date of expiry of the token and the IAT and all of that. So now that we've added the user, we added this user property to the request, and then we added this user or the user info to this user so we can access it. So every time there's a token and we decode it, we can access the user on the request object. So if we have an error, we can say unauthorized yes, and then we return false like this. Return false. Okay, so I guess this is all we need in our checkout function. So we've checked our authentication and then all of that. So let's come back to our main route. So now if here we say if auth return. Okay, if there's no auth, because that is the reason why we're returning false all over. So once we don't have a token header or a token or a bearer, all of this will return false. But if this here, then we return true. This means there is a user. So here we are checking, and if there's no auth, if there's no user, we return AB. But if there's a user, we will proceed. So if there's a user, what do we want to do? We want to just get the user's notes and all of that, and then simply send back to the client. But for now, we don't have any user notes. So what we do in the main route is simply just the user object. So we say, what we do here is we say user ID is equal to get user dot get user ID, and then we pass in the request like this. So now we have access to the user ID. So now that we have access to the user ID, we can, or basically, we can just do something like ID is equal to request as any dot user dot ID, because now we have, once there's a user, this function will now ask the user object to the request object, and the user object contains the ID and the username with other properties. Now we want to access the user ID. So I just want to make it explicit so you understand. Say const username now is equal to, now let me just say request dot user dot user name. Now we are getting an error. What user does not exist on type incoming message. Can you see property user does not exist on type incoming message? That is the reason why we're first of all converting this to any. We don't want to say it's an incoming message. We're first converting it to any. Any accepts any type. Let's say request as any, so that we do away with the error. As any, this is assertions. We discussed about assertions. We're saying the request should be of type any. So now that we have this, then we can see we send success. Send success. Press. And in the data, we contain the user object of ID. It's ID. Username. Like this. So if now that we're signed in, if you come over here and then make this request once more, then we have message success, and then the data we have, the data has a user with ID 1 and then username Crystal. Okay, so this is basically the main route. So let me explain to you how the client side use this main route. When they make a sign up request and then decode it, so when the server decode the token, it will get access to the user information, and then it will allow the request, and then the request will get to the main route. So the main route will then grab other properties and then send back to the client. So that is when the client will get access to the user ID and the username, so they will be able to make subsequent requests. So now that we don't have the user nodes, we can say const nodes is equal to an array, and then we can also say here the user nodes like this. Const nodes implicit type is on the type. Okay. Okay, let's say const n, and then we say nodes is n. This okay. Because this is the type of nodes, an empty array. So if we make this request once more, and then we have the user send back the notes to the client. But before then, let's implement the sign out. Here we have the sign out. And in here, what we want to do is we want to say, we'll make a get request to this, and then we'll say, take the response, and then send back data of a token null. This time around, when they make a sign out request, there will be no token. So the user will be signed out. And then if there's no token, but when you are working on token authentication, you don't really need to implement this in the server. The sign out is handled on the client, because when they make a request and they get the token of the client, the token is stored in the local storage in the browser. So the local storage stores this token for 7 days till it expires. So when the token expires, we make a request, the new token will be returned, and then it will be replaced with the old one. Sorry, the old one will be replaced with the new one. But this is just for demonstration purposes and all of that. And then you see the message here is this sign out success. So I never understood all of this till I started out as a front-end developer, so I never understood. All I did was call the token, get, and then get all of this. So it was when I transitioned to back-end, and then, so this is how all these things are implemented and they are sent to the client. So now I know how to use it on the client. So we need to remove where is the route? Let's head over to the route and then remove this response, because we only need the request. Okay, okay, the response. We only need the response, we don't need the request. Okay, so that's basically that. So moving on, we are done with we're not done, because we have to come over here, get the user notes, and then send to the client. So now that we have implemented that we have other things here. We have we move to the controllers, the nodes controllers, where we have get node, add node, update node, and delete node. So while we are working on this, if anywhere time catches up with us, that is where I will leave the rest for you. And that will be your stage 4 task. Anywhere time catches up with us, I will leave the rest of these controllers for you to be implemented in your task. I'm just letting you know now. So you get your heads up. But there's nothing here. Let's just rush into it and then get to see what we've got. So we just have get notes, and then the get notes, we'll have to move to our models here, notes, and then we say export async function of get notes. Okay. Okay, Anthony. Okay, so get notes takes it takes an ID, because we get the note of the user ID. No, get note, no. This is not a protected route. So we want to get all the notes in our application. So we have get notes. Then we say if DB, then we throw error of DB not initialized. So if there is DB, then we return DB all. And this all, what this file will do is basically say select everything from the notes table. Select everything from notes. So we'll come back to in the index, we'll create another export class of notes. And then we import from notes. We say this is get notes, right? And then we say static get notes is equal to get notes, like this. Now let's get back to our controllers. And we have in our get. So what are we going to do in our get notes? So in our get notes controllers, we simply make a request to get all the nodes from the database, all the nodes. So this is very, very simple. What we do here is we simply say send success. You can even make this a try catch. You can add a try catch block, and then we say data. Then we say nodes is await nodes dot get nodes like this. So we make this an async function. Okay, so now if we go make a request to the, if we go make a request to, let's add another request here of, let's say, notes. This is a get request, and then we send this. Now we have the one we just implemented. Now we don't have any notes. Okay, so now that we have no notes, what we will do is we also add another model that will create notes for us. So how do we create notes? So let's come over here and add another function to create notes in our model. Notes, let's say export async function creates notes. Is it create notes? Basically, it is create, add notes, add notes. Let's make it add notes. We want to add notes. So this one will take three things: title of the notes, content of the notes, and the user ID of the user creating the note. And in here, we have the title is of type string, the content is of type string, and the user ID is of type number, like this. So now let's implement our function. So if db, let us copy this, let's say db not, and then we can abstract this. We can abstract this like the send success and the rest. So we can just say send, let's say db errors, send db error or something like that. We can abstract it. But for now, let's just continue. Let's see, const created node, const created node is equal to await db run. So do you want to create nodes? So we say insert into nodes. So inside the notes table, we want to add a record to the notes table. So we say title, content, and the user ID. And then we say values are this, this, and this. And then pass in the values of the title, content, and user ID, like this. So we want to add, now we want to add and then return the created record. So we say const note ID is equal to created note dot last ID, something like this. Created note last ID. So now we want to return, after creating the note, we return db get, and this get here, passing the types of what we want to get. db get. Okay, thank you, Toby. I never noticed. Okay, thank you. Have user ID. Okay, so now we have we want to get the ID of the task we've created. We have ID number, ID number, the ID of the task, and then the title, string, and then the content, string as well. So what do we want to get? What do we want to get back? We want to simply get back we select ID, title, content, and created at from notes. From notes where ID is equal to the value we provide, which is the node ID, like this. Okay, so basically, this is our add notes function. So we need to go back to our controllers and then handle our add notes. So let's go back to the controllers notes. And then in here, in our controllers add notes, we want to get the body and then pass to JSON. Want to get the body and then pass to JSON. But first of all, not get note. This is add notes. Let's move over to add notes. So first of all, this is an authenticated route because a user must be authenticated before adding notes. So we have check auth, and then we pass in rec yes, and then the auth is equal to check auth, and then we see let's import it as well. If auth, if there's no auth, and then return. And there are other ways we can go about this as well, but in our case, we are just checking it like this. And then we grab the body and all of that. Let's come over here and then try to copy some things. Let's just copy this one like this. And then bring it to notes. Paste it over here. Let's see this. Okay. So now that we have the complete body, we say const title and content is equal to JSON as body. Okay, now we'll do some checking. We say if title or content or user ID, we will say return badge request with a response or field required. I don't want to say title, content, user ID required. I just want to say all ID required or all fields required. So how do we get the user ID? Now, as you can remember, we have the user on the request object. So basically, we can just come over here and say const user ID is equal to get user ID because we already implemented the passing the request. We've already implemented that in the model. If you open the model here you have the get user ID. So we're getting the user ID from the request object because they are authenticated. So we're getting that from the request object. So now we have, if we don't have the ID of the or the title and all of that, we throw that error. Okay, now it's time to add notes. So now, if we get past this stage, we have our all the properties we need to create a new node. So we say await nodes constant is equal to await, and then let's come over to our model. So add nodes. Let's say static add static add nodes is equal to add nodes like this. Come over here and we'll see. Okay. This is equal to add note. And then what we do here, we pass in an object of title. Nope. Title, content, and then user ID like this. So this is all we need to pass to create a note. And then while the note is created, we've also implemented that we return a note. So if there's no note, we throw and return internal server error of REST, and then the message of error creating notes. And then, but if we've successfully created a note, we say send success or response, and then send success of response, and then an object, and this object takes in a status code of status code created, and the data property with notes. The data property of the note we've created. So in this case, let's just, before sending it back, let's see, we get to see it in Postman. So now let's add another request of this is it the mirror, the notes? Okay, let's change this to post, and then in the body, the raw JSON. See title, how to test like a pro. How to test like a pro, and the content is test and keep testing like this. Test and keep testing. So this is all we need. So let's send this and see what we got. Remember, we're already authenticated. The authorization, basic auth, not basic auth, BRI token. Okay, let's send this and see. Great. Now we have the created art. This is the time we created it. 2 minutes after. Okay, this is a different time. I don't know why. And then we have test and keep testing. Then how to test like a pro. How to test like a pro. Now let's add another one. Go to the body. And let's say how to learn SQL. Let's say read meaningful books, and then send the request once more, and then we see how to learn SQL, and then the ID here is 2. So let's change this to get, and then send this. Then we have our notes have 1 and then 2. How to, the user ID is 1 because this is the user that created it. User ID here is 1 and user ID here is 1. Okay, so how to test like a pro, content test and keep testing, and then how to learn SQL and all that. So we have notes in our database. Okay, so now let's go back to the main route. I guess this is the main route, and then we'll go over to this place. We don't have time, but then I just want to do this because the rest of the functions will be implemented by you in your tasks. But then this one here, I just want to make sure it's working. So we, okay, so let's go back to the notes, and then we'll say export async function get user notes. So in the get user note, we only need the user ID, which is a number. So what do we want to do inside of this get user note? The get user note is we say we'll copy this, then bring it over here. If the database is not initialized, and then we'll say okay. So we'll say return db.all, db all, and then we select everything from nodes, everything from nodes where user ID, not caps, please. User ID is the supplied user ID, and then we say here is the user ID, like this. Then we'll come back to our controllers in the auth, and in here, okay, so let's try and in the class. I'm also having a low battery. Okay, so now we see const nodes is equal to await get user notes like this, and then we pass in the ID of the user. So we change this to an async function since we are using await inside of it. And then here we remove this and then we leave the notes like this. Okay, so now after the user is authenticated, they will make a request to the new route and then we get all the user things. So now, once we make a request to the new route, we get the username, the ID, and all the notes the user have created. Okay, so now we have the user ID, the username, and all his notes. The user ID is 1, and if you check the notes, they have the user ID of 1. So if another user sign up or logs in and create notes, the notes will be associated with his account, and this user will not get access to them. Okay, but if you go over to the notes and then try to get all the notes, you'll get the notes of the user, all the users. But this one is a protected route, and all these notes are only associated with this current user. Okay, so that is basically it. We also have other methods here. We have update notes, delete note. Delete note is a very simple one. Update note is a very simple one as well. And then get note, you simply get a note by its ID. Where is it? Here it is. Get note. You simply get a note by its ID. And then update note, you update the note with the supplied credentials, supplied content, the title and the content, and then you update the note. So the delete note and all of that. So we've come to the end of today's class. Thank you all for paying attention, and I hope you all understand. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask. Anthony, any questions? Anthony, before I started this class, I guess you were listening to me when I said you have enough time to ask questions. If you ask me a question, I will pause and then try to explain. But if you don't ask, I will keep on teaching because I will assume you don't have any questions. That is the reason why I sometimes stop and then ask if you have any questions. But you did not ask. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand or drop it on the chat and I will answer you. And I've been doing that. If I see any questions on the chat, I'll have to pause and then try to explain or answer the question. I mentioned this earlier that if you have any questions, call my attention or drop it on the chat or raise your hand and I will attend to you. But you never ask any questions. So do we have any questions? Because this is a whole lot, a whole lot. And I don't even know how people that don't attend class, I don't know how they will cope. Because this is getting more, Anthony, let me not lie to you, but what we are doing here is just a normal thing. This is the basic thing. By the time we get to next, and then we get to Fly, hosting on Fly, and then we start mentioning LightFS, primary instance, and all of that. How to automate with Docker. By the time we start teaching Docker and Prisma, I guess you'll be more confused because this is the end of these basics and all of it. The next class, we begin with Prisma. We just take Prisma for a day, and then the follow will be Docker. Anthony, in tech, there's nothing like slow learners. After today's class, we'll be having another class on Tuesday. You have Saturday, Sunday, and Monday to make research. I don't mind keeping aside days, like 2 or 3 days, to make research on just a single concept. You have these 3 days to make your own research and then get to understand what's going on. So if in the process of making research, if you encounter a concept that you don't understand, you have to break it down into pieces. And then that concept also has other concepts in it that you don't understand. You then have to go back and start picking up those concepts one by one, trying to understand them. So if you understand those concepts one by one, and then you bring them all together, and then you understand what the original concept that you are trying to understand is talking about. Anthony, you are saying React was not this hard. I don't think you understand React. Because I'm a React developer and I love React. I'm a React developer. I actually develop with Remix. I don't use Next.js. I use Remix. And you are saying React, basically React is not hard. If you just want if you don't want to use it to build user interfaces and all of that, and just normal things. But React is actually, can you basically explain the life cycle of components in React? Or can you explain use effects to me as a layman so I can understand? By the time you get up to memorization in React and then optimizations, we have optimization and profiling. So after building your app, you have to optimize it and then you have to profile it. So when you get to profiling and optimization, there's where you know how Remix works under the hood, and you have to optimize all your components so that when the parent components renders, you don't have the child component don't have to render and all of that. So I don't know if, but if you understand React without understanding Node.js, it simply means you don't understand React. Yes, because React is on top of Node. It's on top of Node, and everything set up in React has to do with Node. So I don't understand how you understand React without understanding Node. But basically, as I said, everything is abstracted in React, so the basics are simple to understand and all of that. But that's by the way. If you have any questions, keep dropping it on Discord, and I'll try to, let me just, after this class, I'll take my time out, find resources, and then drop on Discord, so you can go out and learn. Maybe this the structure that is confusing you, the whole structure of our project. But I just did it like that so that you understand, because every function should have, there are rules to all these things. You just don't jump into things. Every function should have a specific task. One function should not do more than one thing. A function should do a single thing. And abstraction is encouraged, is highly encouraged. So if you have any questions, you can drop on Discord, or if you have any, you can ask here so we can answer them. Call today, get to close today's class.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, Anthony.
I want to appreciate you. I don't know, I'm a slow learner, so if I begin to ask my question, it's like starting lecture afresh. I have to go and do my own assignments, but I want to appreciate you. It's just that the space is faster than I can cope. But I know once I learn it, I've learned it. That's me. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So don't rush. You can try to do your tasks and understand what you're doing, but there are things you should just keep for the moment. So after the camp, take your time, analyze all those things, and then try to learn them in depth, because these are not things you just learn in a space of 4 months. just learn the basic things that you need to pass to finish to graduate from this camp, and then after this you take on the other advanced concept. Okay, so that is just it. We will meet on Discord.